Hey guys, welcome to the Smart Venture Podcast. In each episode, we're going to have conversations with some of the top investors, superstar founders, as well as well-known tech company executives in Silicon Valley. We'll have a coffee chat with them to learn their way of thinking and actionable tips on how they build or invest in a successful company. Before we start our show today, I want to make sure the listener, aka you, understand that everything a person say on the podcast only reflects hers or his own opinion, not the show or the company they work at. Our guest today is the former chief ethics officer at Airbnb. Prior to Airbnb, he was the senior vice president and general counsel at Chegg and senior vice president of trust and safety at eBay. He is on the advisory board for Uber, Upwork, and Poshmark. He worked as a federal prosecutor before starting his career in tech. His name is Rob Chesnut. In the last episode, we talked about how Rob started working as a prosecutor to his transition to work in tech. In this episode, we'll focus more on how Rob created his book and how to build ethical culture at work. Please enjoy. I like what you said about the more you spend on creating an ethical culture, the less you will be losing in the long term. Besides Airbnb and eBay, you advise so many legendary companies. Can you tell us more about your mission? What do you want to achieve by writing this book? What are some actions companies or individuals should take after reading the book?
Well, I mean, I think any author would love to see their book at the top of all the bestseller lists, and a ride at Disneyland, right? But realistically, the goal is to get people in business to think about how to drive integrity into the culture of their own company, how to act ethically, and thus even enhance the business to drive even more business. I'm very concerned about climate change. I want businesses to be thinking about what's their role and what can they do to help drive their carbon emissions down. What can we do so that we stop this ridiculous cycle of executives using their power for sex and ruining people's lives that way? So I think it's I think most authors, you want to have impact. So you want people to you want to start the conversation around more integrity in the corporate world, and so that's what I'm after. The book is a great way to, at scale, get your message out there. So I'd love to see a lot of people buy the book and read it, because I think that's the starting point.
Totally. Before reading your book, I know that companies should act ethical. I have to say, I find it quite surprising by a lot of the examples from the book. It makes me think about in so many situations that we were actually in the middle of making an ethical or unethical decision. Tell us more about the creation of your book. There's a mix of high-profile people's thoughts and stories, and also people in different stages of their career. How did you come up with the framework, and how did you collect examples from these people?
Well, if my philosophy in life is, you need diverse perspectives and diverse points of view. You don't have all the answers. Then I had to practice that in writing the book, right? I don't have all the answers around integrity. So I sort of went on a bit of a learning journey. I think the initially it was, I've got all these great learnings from Airbnb that I want to share with the world. But I think in order to do it right, I recognized that I needed to get other people to weigh in on how they looked at integrity in the workplace. So I went out and talked to people like Adam Silver, commissioner of the NBA. I really admire him as a leader. I talked to the founder of Costco. I talked to Eric Holder, former Attorney General of the United States, who I really respected how he ran the Justice Department when he was there. Ben Horowitz. Carlos Santana actually speaks quite a bit about integrity, and I spent some time with him. The science of integrity. Dan Ariely is a behavioral scientist at Duke. And it actually kind of surprised me that when I went out and talked to Dan Ariely, there was actually some science behind some of the things that I was doing at Airbnb. Quite accidentally, I had stumbled on some things that actually had some scientific backing to them. So, I think there was I started the process thinking that I was going to share with the world what I learned. But I think in doing so, I went on a journey that I learned quite a bit about integrity in the process of writing the book. But look, it was a long process. The book took over a year to write it. But it was a great learning journey in the process of doing it.
I love that your original goal was to share what you've learned to the world. Then you went on a learning journey, talked with so many different people from different walks of life. Tell us more about how you even started the conversation with them on ethics. You really made ethics sound cool.
Yeah. Brian said that to me. Brian looked at me one day and said, "You've actually made ethics cool." And I didn't think that was possible. But I think it's not that hard because people are uncomfortable talking about integrity because I think they feel like it's too personal or moral and you're trying to impose your values on somebody else. Yeah, I don't look at it that way. I actually think that the world presents you with a lot of really interesting integrity-related dilemmas or questions all the time. And let's get over the discomfort. I think so many people are uncomfortable in part because they feel like, oh, well, they're worried somebody's going to say, well, who are you? Tell me about integrity. Look, I know you've done this. I kind of look at it with we're not perfect. I'm certainly not perfect. And so there's a disclaimer right at the beginning is that this is not, I have no right to write this book because I'm any more ethical than anybody else. I think what gives me the perspective isn't my quote unquote high integrity. It's more that I've thought about it and been willing to actually talk about it. And I think once you get over that discomfort, it's actually a really interesting subject. And a lot of people want to talk about it because once you start the conversation and you realize you're not setting them up to make them sound like they're perfect. We're just people trying to work through doing the right thing. People are willing to talk about it because they realize, I think, ultimately, like, wow, you're right. We shouldn't be uncomfortable with this subject. And in fact, the more we get over the discomfort and the more we talk about it, the more I think we are, really encouraging good behavior. Ambiguity and silence are enemies of integrity. Dan Ariely taught me that. So let's get over the discomfort. Let's talk about it. And in doing so, I think just the conversation encourages better behavior.
I love how you spark the conversation, making people feel comfortable talking about ethic issues. I remember you mentioned that you built a program at Airbnb. There is an ethic empowerment team that employees can go talk to. How should other companies start similar programs?
Well, it has to start at the top. If the CEO and the leadership aren't committed to running a business with integrity, then you're lost. Because look, they're going to set the tone. I say that a CEO is the thermostat for integrity, not a thermometer. A thermometer takes the temperature in the room, but a thermostat sets it. And depending on how the CEO and leadership act, that creates the environment for everybody in the company and how they're going to act. If your CEO is saying things like, we need to hit this sales number no matter what, don't come back to me and tell me you've missed it. Right? Well, that sends one message. That almost sends a message of cut corners. It gives you implicit permission to do whatever it takes. If a CEO is meeting with the CFO every quarter and saying, we're going over these numbers. If there's anything at all that makes you uncomfortable with these numbers, I want you to tell me. We're not going to jail. We're going to do things the right way. Now that sets a very different tone on the thermostat. So I think start with leadership. And then if leaders are bought in, then I think it's a matter of, you don't need a chief ethics officer to be ethical. What you need is, like at Airbnb, we had 6,000 plus employees. I wanted 6,000 chief ethics officers. I wanted people to feel like it was theirs, to feel like they owned it, that they were comfortable raising their hand and asking a question. And if you can do that, you can create this environment. Dan Ariely talks about creating an environment where integrity is just talked about. And that makes a huge difference. He does an experiment, this math experiment I talk about in the book, where he hands out math problems to everybody in the room and says, all right, do the problems. I'm not going to give you enough time to finish. When I say stop, put your pencil down. So he hands out the paper, people do the problems. He says stop, they stop. And then one by one, he has them come up to the front of the room and put their piece of paper and shred their math problems. And then as they leave the room, they tell the proctor how many problems they did. And the proctor gives them $1 for every problem that they say they did. How many? Now, what Dan doesn't tell them is that he's modified the shredder. The shredder only shreds the outer edge of the piece of paper. So he knows exactly how many problems they had done. So the question is, how many people tell the truth to the proctor when they're getting their money? And how many people lie? 70% of people lie. Now, most of them don't lie by a lot. They fudge a little bit. Yeah, you know what? People will always look at a situation in their own self-interest. We all think we've got integrity, but we'll fudge to our own benefit a little bit, right? As long as we can rationalize, as long as we can still tell ourselves that we're a good person. So Dan will do the same problem again, but this time he'll ask everybody, before you start doing the math problems, write as many of the 10 commandments down at the top of the piece of paper as you can. So what does he learn with this? Well, number one, he learns that no one knows all the 10 of the 10 commandments. In fact, most people can only name a few. But just the act of putting that in their mind and putting that frame of reference, when he does that at the beginning of the exercise, guess what? Cheating virtually disappears. So creating this environment around everybody writing the 10 commandments down. Here's another one, the British revenue authorities. They're charged with collecting people's taxes. And they're trying to collect taxes from people who haven't paid. So they're delinquent. They send out a letter, right, to get everybody to pay. They add one sentence to the letter, and it increases the tax collection by 20 basis points, by 20 percentage points. Big increase. What do you think that one sentence is? Now, I would have thought the sentence is something threatening, right? Like failure to pay taxes can lead to a seizure of your assets, garnishment of wages, and the like. No, that's not what it is. The one sentence was 9 out of 10 Britons pay their taxes on time. So what they've done, adding that one sentence, bumped the collection rate up significantly. And it's making people understand that what they're doing is out of step with everybody else, because everybody wants to feel good about themselves. So creating this environment where people feel that others around them are doing the right thing, reminding people of their better selves, that actually plays a big role in integrity. So if you can create that environment, move that thermostat, reminding people of their better selves, it can make a big difference in a company.
I really love those stories. I think it's so important to make people feel comfortable to participate and create an environment that supports for ethical behaviors. People definitely have different thermostat. They have different measurement on what's ethical or not. It's so true that people want to lie a little bit to make themselves feel better as long as they could justify.
I understand that rationalizing process. People will, if they can rationalize their behavior. Another example of what, I didn't put this one in the book, but something that Dan does is he'll take a vending machine, like a Coke machine, and put a sign, a big sticker that basically says, if this machine malfunctions, call this number, this 800 number, right? And then he rigs the vending machine so that when you put your money into it, the soda comes out, but your money comes back too. You get your money back. So you're getting free sodas. And then they watch the vending machine to see how many people called the number to report the vending machine being out of order. How many people call that number? Nobody calls that number. People stay at the machine, and when they realize they're getting free sodas, many of them take 3 and 4. Mm-hmm. Now, why? Well, I think because a lot of people feel like, oh, I've been ripped off by vending machines in the past, right? Or, wow, they charge so much money in these vending machines. So they feel like they can still feel like they're a good person and take 3 or 4 sodas. You've got to get to this world where, in a company, where people feel as though other people are acting with integrity, that integrity is valued and rewarded, and people are reminded of their better selves. Boy, when you can do that, then I think you're really on a path to running a high integrity company.
Yeah, that story is so real. If you question these things, sounds like you have a really good moral compass. The story you just mentioned remind me of the story you told about your mom tell you to return the money back to the grocery store. Who is a person you look up to when it comes to have a good ethical guideline?
My mom. I think parents have a big role here. My mom taught me when I was really young and had a big influence on me. And I think I don't look at it like, who do I look up to? Mm-hmm. Because I think I've got to have my own moral compass. But what it is really important to do is, some things are easy. Lying, cheating, stealing, we can all agree that's easy. Those things are unethical. But a lot of times these ethical issues are complicated. They can be gray. And they can be, a reasonable minds can disagree. And what I've learned is I don't look up to someone, but I look to different, diverse perspectives. Mm-hmm. So at Airbnb, for example, we have a group of ethics advisors. Mm-hmm. Because I shouldn't be like Moses with the 10 commandments telling everybody I have all the answers, because I don't have all the answers. I'm biased. Mm-hmm. I'm biased. I have a particular point of view that was created, I think, through a lifetime of upbringing, socioeconomic background, and experiences, which means that my perspective isn't the only perspective. Mm-hmm. So we have a group at Airbnb of about 30 ethics advisors, and they are intentionally a very diverse group, both race, gender, nationality, even what they do for a living. People in marketing may have a very different perspective than someone in engineering or finance about what's ethical. So what I figured out is that by listening to a number of different people's perspectives on a particular ethical situation, I learn a lot. Mm-hmm. And so I think it's, being open and self-aware enough to realize that I don't have all the answers, and that coming to the right answer for a company really should involve a process where you listen to diverse perspectives. Mm-hmm.
All these stories in your book are super relatable. Like you said, a lot of the situations are in the gray area. It's debatable. I remember one of the examples in your book was one sister is in a city selling sports merch, and the other sister is working for a bigger company doing the same thing. And one sister sent an envelope to the other sister of their client list to help her out. They aren't even in the same city, not really direct competitors. You also have no evidence on those things. Is it right or wrong? How do you prevent these things from happening? Or situations like you took some extra pen or food from your company to give it to a roommate. Are those wrong things to do? I think sometimes it's hard to have a clear answer on things. It does make me question what I was doing, and it definitely is a great book.
Yeah, that's neat. Yeah, the goal is to make you think, because in the moment, we all give ourselves the benefit of the doubt. Right? We all do the thing that's in our self-interest, but looking at it from the outside, it may look quite different. So I think it's just important to add that ethical frame to our life, just like hopefully we add it to our business dealings. And I think that I think it can lead to a more ethical world.
Yeah, totally. In the current situation, we're all quarantining, we're all working from home, and potentially some of us might work from home in forever. How should companies create the ethical framework or culture when the whole team don't sit in the same office?
You're going to have to more aggressively communicate. I think leaders, times like this require leaders to communicate often. Like Brian and Airbnb still does a Thursday employee meeting, all employee 1 hour every week with Brian, where employees can submit questions in advance or ask them live. And I think that, when the pandemic's behind us, I think there'll be more remote work. I don't know if it will be quite as aggressively remote as people think, but I think there are a lot of advantages to being, actually in the same office, knowing each other, creating a culture. And I think that even where work is more remote, you're going to see a lot of offsites. I think you need human connection as a fundamental part of building a culture. And I think you're going to have to make sure you take time in these communications or in these offsites to talk about these things. Because you're right, it's going to be harder to create a culture when you're not all in the same building or the same space when you're working remotely.
I think it's even harder to come up with the ethic guidelines for remote work. Some of my friends' company are outsourcing most of their company. I have friends' company look very legit online, only have 10 or 20 core employees. They hired 80% of part-time people. How would you have a consistent company culture in this case?
I think that's a challenge, isn't it? I don't pretend that there's a big answer other than to recognize that it's a big challenge and realize that you've got to act with intentionality to try to overcome that. I think you've got to spend time with the people that are the gig workers and let them know, look, this is the way that we operate here. And for the work that you're going to do with us, this is what we need from you. This is what we expect from you. But it is... I think the more turnover and the more gig workers you have, the harder it is to establish a culture of integrity. You have to, I think, spend extra effort to overcome that challenge.
Thank you so much for bringing this to the table. I think in your book, you gave so many specific examples, but you still have an open answer for everyone to evaluate ethic for themselves. It's really humbling to admit that it is a challenge for people to create ethical culture when people aren't in the same physical space. I like that your book is not a textbook. There's no black and white answer in most times in real work situations. You can't just copy and paste one company's ethical guideline into another company. We're at the last part of our interview. I have 3 questions for you. What's your favorite book? My current favorite book is definitely your book.
That's great.
Who made the biggest impact in your career, and who would you invite to your dinner party?
Okay. Favorite book. I'm going to go Adam Grant's Give and Take right now. I think it's a terrific book around the philosophy of how you operate your life that even though Adam doesn't go there, I think it really goes nicely with the things I talk about in my book, because I think the companies that give will actually be more successful than companies that don't. So I'll go with Adam Grant's Give and Take. Biggest influence has got to be my mom. I think that it starts young, but I think the principles that she taught me were very powerful lessons early on that made a big difference in how I operate today. So my mom gets the nod for that one. So the dinner party. How many people do I get to invite to my dinner party?
It's your party, so
my party. Let's see. I really admire leaders who have a lot of humility and who are, I like sports leaders in particular. So I would go with, I love the time I got to spend with Adam Silver at the NBA. And I think that what the NBA does is right in the center of so much that's going on right now with integrity. Right? They're very involved in racial justice. And I think they've navigated those things really well. So, and I also like University of Virginia basketball coach Tony Bennett. I went to school at UVA, so I'm a little biased there, but his team won the national championship. Yet at the same time, his fellow college basketball coaches recognized him as being the most ethical college basketball coach in a business that has a reputation of being really tough. So how somebody becomes number one the national has a national championship team while not breaking the rules of being recognized as the most ethical, to me is really, really remarkable. I'll also pick Carlos Santana. I think he's a really high integrity, very spiritual person who is a fascinating person to hang around and talk to. So I would invite those to the dinner.
Nice. That's awesome. I love that. Where can we find you after work? In other words, what's your hobby?
Oh, so I've got a ranch up in Napa and love hiking and gardening up there. You'll also find me shooting baskets and hitting golf balls with my son. So I think those are, or riding my bike.
The nature things. Yeah, I love that. Yeah. Thank you so much, Rob, for coming on to the show. And everyone should totally check out your book. I absolutely love that. And yeah, thank you so much.
Grace, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
All right. That's all we have for today. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Smart Venture Podcast. If you like it, please leave us a quick review and hit subscribe so you don't miss any tips from the experts. If you want to receive our updates, please leave your email at smartventurepod.com. If you want to connect with me, all my socials are at Grace Gong GG. Beside LinkedIn, it's just Grace Gong. I'd love to connect with you and let me know your thought about the show. Now you can listen to Smart Venture Podcast on YouTube. Go to smartventurepod.com, click YouTube link on the top banner. Don't forget to hit subscribe and smash the like button. See you next time.